Every now and then, a game throws caution to the wind and becomes the talk of the town. Much like a legendary New Year's Eve party, that's what Titanfall 2 is. A bold, memorable experience that stands out. I will be going over why this game is good, for any potential devs to ponder. I purely focus on its game design pillars, and slightly mention the things that let it down. Gaming is an art form, and there's no real right or wrong way to do it. There is just current general expectations. It's okay to break some of those expectations, but not all of them at once. I hope to achieve an understanding of the game design and discover its key points that can be reused by me or someone else. Titanfall 2 wasn't successful. I'm not a specialist in the whole marketing thing. That's a whole nother box. My interest is purely what keeps people playing and what devotes them to it. In a healthy way, of course. Making games too addictive will only ruin the market, pissing where you eat. Science unfortunately has a place to play in this medium, but it's a science of sustainability. I can only make a random guess that the reason why it failed was that it wasn't as familiar as Call of Duty. Yeah, this game really reminds me of the movie Elysium, the one with Matt Damon. I can only describe this game as an overpacked box, meaning there is a lot to the game. We have two main gimmicks to get our heads around, parkour and mech control. The reason I say overpacked is because the story mode is said to be very short. Well, it is, and there is a lot to learn in this short amount of time. Thankfully you can play through again, so it's not too big a deal. But the story does all wind in very quickly. Now, I'm not saying the story mode should be longer. No, I think it's perfect. Even a level less I would be happy. The game is short, but it's punchy. It really has some amazing level content. I was super impressed with all the large scale objects which translate, rotate and spin through space and time. The work that must have gone into this, wow. I'll talk about its replay value soon, which make it vastly longer. The story's length is just a typical echo chamber off the internet, casted by reviewers. This is an online focused game after all. Pillar 1, its content. This is a big subject. This game is anything but generic. There are so many things it delivers, and everything it does well. Let us go over the states and gameplay loop. First, the main character's ground and combat state. The shooting mechanics are the most manually predictive I have ever used. What you think translates to the screen. The weapons are great, they have a nice feedback, visceral and accurate. There is no health bar. You will have to take cover to recover if needed. For the last 20 years this has been pretty standard stuff for the FPS genre. It helps keep the player in the action. Let's talk about the parkour. Well, it's fairly simple. At its base, a wall run. Everything the player can do with parkour uses the wall run as a platform to chain more complex traversal. The levels are designed with this in mind. Okay, the mech state. The mech state changes the formula up again. You take damage slowly, so you're not concerned with being in the fray. You have special attacks that you can use to deal more damage. And then after an RTS style cooldown, these abilities become available again. The mech, however, uses a traditional health bar. There are many health drums littered around the battlefield. On the higher difficulties, these battles are very challenging. The player has to become very familiar with the various weapons to exploit the combat. The game loop. The game loop seems to be foot controls with parkour traversal and level solving until you get your mech through a barrier. Then you embark into your mech and have a mech battle. Your mech's name is BT, by the way. Every time the loop iterates, something is generally added, and that's all there is to it, and that's all there should be. Gameplay loops should be simple. The game has a lot of content, but is still very straightforward. Basically, you just run through, level to level, with very little mucking around. The pace is fast, and so is the tempo. The player is given the ability to become invisible. This is your cloak, and it can be used very often, every 15 seconds roughly. The idea behind the cloak is really for the hardest difficulties. It adds an option that works surprisingly well. Cover, cloaking, corner shooting, and you can get yourself through. The game is quite challenging on those harder difficulties. This title gives the player plenty for their money. First play it on easy, then try hard, then have a go at master difficulty. By then the player is well trained and you have an easy 30 hours on your hands. One thing to mention in the harder modes is that the enemies react a lot quicker to the player, often mistaken as AI. Now to be clear, AI doesn't exist in the enemies. It is just conditions met and code executed. State-based logic is what we have here, and I don't think I've ever played a game that has anything else. Some games really blur the line and give an impression of AI. Games like BioShock come quite close. It's a feeling. No enemy learns about the player, decides to retreat to get more backup, allows all of his friends to get shot, and cleverly places a mine in a narrow hallway for you, the player, to inevitably run into, whilst camping on a platform up high, ready to finish off the player if the mine didn't do its job. So let's just know that even though we call it AI, it's actually state-based logic. In Titanfall 2, the state-based logic is a bit better than average. I like how if an enemy's ally dies, and the enemy is close enough, he might randomly play a reacting animation. Little things like this give the impression of artificial intelligence, and will then also give the player options in difficult situations, as animations need time to be executed. Pillar 2, the presentation. This game looks good. The environments are alive. This game has vision. The sci-fi aesthetic is base. If video game movies were good, then this would make a decent sci-fi flick, I can tell you. I can really see a younger Matt Damon playing as the main protagonist. The visuals all pop, and the colour palette looks almost indie levels of creative. Titanfall was developed on the Source engine. This engine was the platform Half-Life was developed on. It's not new, it was built for first-person shooters, and the toolset it offers to get a game like this made must be well oiled by now. Very masterful stuff. My mind was blown when I played the house getting built level. It was purely a flex by the developers. Actually, there's a few flexes in the game, but that was the first one I noticed. An action sci-fi really begs to have presentation like this. Okay, now Pillar 3, quality over quantity. Yes, this game is roughly a 6-hour game, and that's a good thing. No filler here, no running for hours to do the next thing. You are virtually in it non-stop. It's like a Jason Bourne film. Overall, I love the experience. There's not much to say about the quantity and the quality. It's just what it is. You kind of have to play it to know. But I will just say that open world games and RPGs have a lot of filler, and it kind of works for them in a way, but sometimes it just doesn't, and I think it's okay to have a short experience if it's good.
Ready to transfer control to pilot.
Cooper will cover you from the rear. Take the deck and get to the Draconis.
1, Viper's on station. Your journey ends here, pilot. The skies belong to me.
Overall, I love the experience. I don't think we will be getting anything like this anytime soon, and it also proves that skills don't always pay the bills. Titanfall 2 failed financially. Maybe a lesson in how much hype is created versus what is actually given. In Titanfall's case, less should have been given. The levels were a little too ambitious, most likely adding a bunch of production costs. It's a hard one, eh? Because as a game fan you want more from it. Better character development with better directed voice acting is my vote. Especially from the main protagonist. Don't get me wrong, BT the robot does a great job, and he's really the only one I liked or got an affinity with. But you can see why that's an unreasonable ask. Interesting how the silent protagonist can purify the game the way it does. If no characters talk or have anything to say, then sometimes that can make it better. The player gets used to it. Their imaginations take over and start to sum it up, like reading a good book. But then for a AAA developer, they have to consider the reviewers and how relentless they can be, and the echo chamber that is the internet. Who knows? Because at the end of the day, it's all an art form. and what people expect can ruin that. So Titanfall 2, great game. You should go play it, learn from it. If you want to make an FPS, definitely it should be in your list of games to play.
This is Pilot Jack Cooper, signing off.